Welcome to Zanaco Unplugged, the podcast series that takes us inside Zambia's biggest bank and brings you conversations with business leaders, creatives, tech, innovation, and pioneers. We have topics that range from leadership, the workplace, innovation, sustainability. We go all the way around. My name is Rosie BC, and I am super proud and privileged to be your host for Zanaco Unplugged Season 2. And what a time to be alive when you can identify with Zanaco turning 55 this year. Today, I am super proud and excited to be having a conversation on culture immersion for the future of work. And who best to have this conversation with than the Africa Regional Lead for Employer Relationships and Country Manager for ACCA, Ms. Janice Matwi. How are you doing, Janice?
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm doing well, and I am delighted to be on the show. And congratulations to Zanaco. It's a big feat. Half a century is really brilliant.
When you put it like that, right?
Yeah.
Also joining us in this conversation on cultural immersion for the future of work, we have the head of communications at Zanaco, Kyembe Kyalusanza.
Hi, Rose. Thank you so much. Delighted to be here. Excited to get right into it.
Fantastic. So when we think about the cultural immersion of future work, I think we need to unpack what actually happens behind the scenes. And this is why we carefully selected the participants for this conversation this morning. Janice, we look at some of the statistics when it comes to a work week. It is believed that there would be around 40 to 45 hours per week, which translates into round about 2,080 hours annually that an employee would be putting in. So when you think about that, as a regional, Africa Regional Lead for Employer Relations at ACCA, you obviously deal with thousands of employees. How do you make sure that your workplace is welcoming and respectful to employees, knowing that they're spending the majority of their time at work?
That's a really good question, Rose. I think what we've seen, the progression of the workplace is such that, particularly after after COVID, after the pandemic, it evolved quite significantly.
Yeah.
And the transformation demands that we redesign the workplace. Right. And a lot of the work that I do with ACCA is actually outward facing. It's not usually inward facing.
Okay.
So we support hundreds of employers around Africa to create, workplaces where they can retain staff. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that the conversations that we're having is how do you train staff? Because it's an evolved world. Mm-hmm. One of the things that ACCA has is that we used to say it's a changing world.
Yeah.
But up until recently, we said, no, it's a changed world, right? It's already changing. We need the right skills enabled to thrive, in order to thrive. So I think one of the things that we are having conversations, we do quite a lot of research called Professional Insights, and that research is free. We give it out to employers, and we have conversations around the evolving role, especially of finance people, the evolving role of a lot of roles, especially supply chain, marketing, quite a number of things have changed. And how do you then create that environment where you can retain talent?
True. Because
we are moving beyond thinking employees to talent, because they're bringing in the best thing that they know. Of course, to exchange, it's a monetary exchange with an employer. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things is understanding how to retain talent. Mm-hmm. The second thing is creating psychological safety, because you need to be able to get feedback. In a world where, things have changed so much, is that you need to be able to hear back from your teams. And so psychological safety, a lot of town halls, we are seeing quite a number of employers having conversations about the direction of the company. It used to be that, strategic health was usually in board packs, or, the management team would, but now everyone knows, from the cleaner to the MD. So again, that open communication is important for people to be able to give back, because especially in a bank, a person who opens the door has so much data. If you sit down and have a conversation, they'll tell you that people don't like to queue up. That queue is always slow. So there's value there, but you have to give them that psychological safety to be able to give you that feedback. And of course, finally, is putting in place policies, creating fairness in the workplace.
Good.
Diversity and inclusion. It shouldn't just be on paper. It's creating fairness. For the first time in 100 years, we have 4 generations working together. It used to be that this generation will be entering and that one will be leaving. So you have, boomers, you have millennials, you have, Gen Z, and, and now I think there's Generation Alpha that may be entering the workplace in the next few years. So all of those factors are really key to creating an environment where people feel they can belong, because belonging then makes people want to deliver better.
I love that. And just really transitioning seamlessly into what I'd like Kyembe to take us through is that when you think about what Janice has attributed to the different types of employees that you have, from she referred to a security guard, and even within Zanaco, with your thousands and hundreds of employees that come through the door, surely there has to be a deliberate strategy from the communications perspective where you make sure that every employee or talent is valued, their diverse views are included, and then their perspective is heard. How do you do it at Zanaco?
One of the things we do at Zanaco is obviously we are an employer that does focus on diversity and inclusion, because we believe that, I think that is critical to even driving strategy. The unique diversity and of our staff, and I'm proud to say right now we do sit at a 50-50 women and men in the organization.
Well
we have over
done.
1,000 staff, right?
Wow.
That alone, I think, is something that has changed our landscape, right? So having that deliberate effort, whether you're going to be in your hiring process, we are having that. Are we keeping the balance? Are we hiring the right talent in terms of diversity? So that definitely does drive that deliberate steps around that. Number 2, I think a key area here, and we heard about town halls, at the core of it too is leadership, right? What is the leadership doing in terms of enabling the environment to have feedback? And one of the ways that we do that, and we have very dynamic town halls every quarter, and in there you have the senior leadership team talking to staff, but staff also give immediate feedback. So you get real-time feedback, around that. And that does help, I think, first of all, from the leadership perspective, how they're going to drive culture. Interestingly, though, as Janice mentioned, she mentioned something around even the security guard who will know and is in tune. It is important to then have the communication pathways that are going to ensure that the vision, the mission, the purpose of the organization is carried through. And then that then also just translates into everyone else that we're then getting on board, whether it's the customer's experience, my colleagues' experience, and what we put out there in the end, what in terms of what represents Zanaco, and being ready for, I guess, the next 55 years as well.
Indeed.
Yeah.
What I absolutely love about Zanaco's hierarchy and leadership, when you talk about 50-50 representation, it's very glaring that you have women heading most of the departments in Zanaco. Do you believe that you're doing a great job in terms of decision-making inclusion when it comes to diversity and inclusion? Do you feel that the leadership break of 50-50 has contributed positively to that? Would you say that?
So just to give context, right? So the leadership space, we are sitting at, say, maybe 35% in leadership for women. Okay. Right? And I know sometimes when you see that our CEO is female, it immediately takes over the narrative. But we're happy about that, because this if we really think about it, not too long ago, and that's why we celebrate female CEOs, when really it shouldn't even have to be the case, but it's taken quite a bit to get female CEOs to that space. Without going delving into that a bit further, but there is a very deliberate effort, and like I said, in our hiring processes, in our organizational policies, to ensure that we're building a very good balance in terms of upcoming leadership, right? So whether that's senior leadership, one downs, who's coming on to take on those roles, the departments that are below our executive team, for example, what's happening there. There's a very, very deliberate drive to get more women in those or more balance, let me put it that way, in those leadership positions, because it is critical. Communication, for me, if I bring it back to that space, there is a form of responsibility that does sit with leadership to ensure that you can get communication. Communication is not one way. It is, two-way. And I think that diversity then becomes critical. I'll tell you, Zanaco has a spread of 1,000 plus employees, and over 60% of those staff sit between Gen Z and millennials. So you can imagine just that alone changes the context of how is communication happening, how are leaders being groomed from that space to carry on the vision, to deliver what the future for a workplace will look like. And are we preparing ourselves? Because if we're having over 60% of the workforce sitting in the millennial space and Gen Z space, it does mean, to Janice's point, that we have to have very deliberate plans across the board and how we're ensuring that the same message is being delivered to 4 generations effectively.
Therein lies the experience. But hold that thought. You've really triggered something very interesting there. But just piggybacking on that, Janice, we are talking culture immersion for the future of work. And you already said the future is now. We are in a changed world. So from your perspective, how would you believe that you are driving initiatives that speak to diversity in the workplace, and how does the organization focus on driving that diversity and inclusion, bearing in mind what Kyembe has already highlighted in terms of the 60% of the target market and the employee base that you're dealing with?
So it's really amazing to hear the amazing work that Zanaco is doing.
Yeah.
I think being very mindful of the space that you're in, employers that are not listening usually have a lot of people leave the organization. But in terms of diversity and inclusion, so there's something that I like to share that I heard somewhere that was saying that diversity is inviting people to the party, and then inclusion is asking them to dance, right? So you invite people into a room, but are they really being heard, right? Because a lot of, especially now with the advent of ESG or, governance demands that, there's inclusion.
Right.
But when we invite people into certain spaces, are they being heard? So there's even a component now, there's diversity, inclusion, equity and inclusion, right? But there's also a B now, which is belonging. So how are you ensuring that people walk into a space and they belong? It used to be that people used to, especially management, used to talk at people. And I was so delighted to hear your town hall gives real-time feedback, because then people can then say, look, this is not working. A lot of the times in leadership, we do have amazing, strategic ambitions on paper, but sometimes, the end user rejects it because it just doesn't work. And so because we do not have, I sit in the office, I am leading from a strategic perspective. I need feedback from the operational team to be able to tell me what's happening. I need feedback from the people that are building the apps or the people that the touch points around the business. And so that, and again, and earlier on, I didn't explain what psychological safety is. It's just the safety for people to be able to give feedback, right? I remember earlier on in my career, we used to fill out company surveys, and very honestly so. And you were told, this is anonymous. And you get to a point where your supervisor then starts saying, so you have a problem with the way I speak. And you're thinking, wait, I wrote that in the company survey. It was supposed to be private. So people had apathy. And then people felt that there was nothing being done with the pulse survey. You are measuring a pulse that's not there. And people sort of just stop, filling that out. But the belonging now comes into, and belonging is building trust. So
That's
how,
what it is.
as management, are you building trust? Can people trust that the surveys are private? Can people trust that there will be no retaliatory behaviors with supervisors? And then can people trust that the feedback matters? So having even, programs such as, succession planning. You talked about succession planning. Are people being able to see themselves rise through the ranks, that my contribution will matter in 6 months, in 4 years, in 5 years? Will it matter? That creates belonging because people have something to look forward to. So diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging is just more than a piece of paper. It's just more than ticking a box and saying, we have governance policies that includes everyone. It's also understanding that there are people going through different phases in their lives. So for instance, we have, millennials going through, premenopause. So how are you accommodating people in that phase? So for instance, ACCA was one of the first companies in the world to create a premenopause and menopause policy. So you are actually taken care of. You don't feel when you're having you're in a boardroom having a conversation and, you have a hot flash and you're thinking, oh dear Lord, what are they going to think about me? Yeah. And so it's all of those things. It's moving to family policies to understand that, family days or, taking children to under 5, also men need to get involved in that because they're also a parent, right? So it's also understanding and beginning to teach people as well, not to take advantage. The dreaded Women's Day, Mother's Day, and it's gotten a bad rap, but it actually has a good use. So how are we then creating allies to, especially male supervisors, to understand that if somebody takes a Mother's Day, they're having an issue with nature. They can't fight it, right? Yeah. But it's also understanding and speaking to women and saying, please don't use it because you had a fight with your boss and tomorrow your phone is off. Mother's Day, you switch off your phone. So I think it's all of these things and understanding. So it's building allyship by creating communication, creating policies and communicating and unpacking it in such a way that people understand that it's for the greater good and it's for the teams. And mental health has become, we also have a mental health policy. So all of those things are really important to creating belonging, which is diversity and inclusion.
Fantastic. And just riding on that tide, Kyembe, where Janice is taking us is understanding the mental well-being, the places, the different dynamics that are happening with employees in the workplace, male and female. And that really borders a lot on communication. So from your perspective and how you approach the different groups of teams that you've already identified, which you already attributed to the larger force being the millennials or the Gen Z, how do you get them to move in one direction when it comes to your communication strategies? Maybe share some effective and inclusive communication ideas or strategies that you implement, and then we'll quickly come to a close.
Okay, so I'll tell you, listening to, I think, this whole thing coming together, one thing I consistently say, when I hear trust, it is how much do I know about something, right? When I hear belonging, it's how much do I know about something for me to feel like I'm a part of it. Yeah. And a lot of that is to ensure understanding, right? And therein lies the importance and why communication then becomes a critical piece, because how this is delivered is how I'm going to run with it, right? Zanaco does have a set of values of valued behaviors that we want to run with, and some of those are one of those creativity, innovation, teamwork, accountability, and the consistent communication around this, right, then drives the culture in the organization to then align, right? So if you're going to have an issue, for example, with Mother's Day, truly, is there a level of accountability that everybody across the board is having? You know what I mean? So as an example, right? So when we do speak to across the bank, we have several platforms. And I think it's to understand not everybody loves WhatsApp, but we do have a WhatsApp community. And on that community, we then share this is the quick place where we can be like, share this information out. Can I have your quick information? And, I love with the coming of AI, I get to do a lot more in the communication space, because I can have real-time feedback as well to tailor my communication. Like, okay, I've talked about this way. I figured out this is not working. Using data to say, okay, I noticed only 100 people read this. How can I get over half the bank to read it? I literally just ask on the WhatsApp group, do a quick poll. Guys, do you know about this? And immediately you hear, never heard of it. No idea. Yes, I do.
Oh,
I
my
would love
goodness.
it. Yeah. And immediately I'm like, okay, guys, let's go back to the drawing board. How can we ensure that this thing that we thought had rolled out well actually lands well? And that's one that's worked well for us. One of the other ways we do it also is, obviously there's the usual internal emailers. With those, at best, using technology, you will measure how many people have opened or read. But where are we having the interaction? We have internal platforms where an intranet kind of place where people then post a little bit more like what you would do with Facebook, right? Oh, look at this. Our team achieved this time around. And you post your picture and you get immediate feedback. And you then have that whole, oh my gosh, I'm not so detached from the team that's in Siavonga because I actually saw what they did, and then drives the, I belong to the bank.
That's the
the
word
risk
belong.
that you do run in a space where you have over 1,000 employees is the split. Is the message landing well? But I think with the immediate feedback that we've had in place outside of town halls, which is fantastic,
Right.
is use of the WhatsApp groups for those who want to use the WhatsApp groups. I mean, we have 1,000 staff, and trust me, not 1,000 people are talking on all of those, but those who are quick to get the information there, quickly run with it. And you're like, okay, there's the I want to read on email because that feels more official to me. And then we make sure that's being done. But most importantly, to all of this communication, one of the key things we realize and are pushing quite strongly is, yes, there's technology. Yes, there's AI. Yes, you're getting feedback immediately, but we want the human touch.
Never
And
ever
that
lose that.
becomes important to continue. So they want to hear from leadership. They want to hear from a colleague. They want to hear from another team. And so the human touch that then does come with, the colleague interactions, the sometimes just walking the floor, to be honest, can make the difference. All adds up to what are we trying to do to ensure that this culture, or these messages, or these plans that we have in place, these deliverables, these goals are actually landing appropriately across the board. It's really just understanding who we're dealing with, what our demographic is, and how do they want to be spoken to
Yeah.
get the information quickly.
Human touch. That's just it. And you've just really, really nailed it. Coming to a close, Janice, what does the futuristic of work look like at ACCA?
So last week, we launched another policy called Work from Abroad, where you can work. We are in 183 countries. So you have 10 days that you can, if you go on holiday and you decide to extend your holiday, you can take 10 days in that country and work from there. All you have to do is let your supervisor know. And so mobility becomes a very big piece. So people want to have flexi time as well. Okay. So we have flexi time where you have 2 days you don't work in the office. You can work from home and you're equipped. Okay. As long as, so our work in ACCA is more productivity based rather than you being in the office. It's not about visibility, because you could sit in the office for 8 hours and play solitaire. And
Very
that
true.
gives away my age when I talk about playing solitaire. But there are people that could be on Facebook and all of that. So the future of work is productivity based. Yep. It's mobility. It's people being able to have work-life balance. We have a policy where a no contact policy during leave. If it's urgent, we'll get in touch. But
So
even
if
then,
someone is on leave, leave them alone.
leave them alone. Don't email them. Don't ask them about. You must, because we have in our emails most of the times at the bottom it to say my next leave is in this many days. Okay. So you can look, if Kyembe is going on leave in 2 weeks, I need to do my business with her before she goes, rather than saying, unless the house is burning, don't reach me when I'm on leave. So that's work-life balance as well.
Yeah. And from the Zanaco perspective, Kyembe, how do we look at effectiveness and productivity and driving that type of a culture of belonging and ensuring that the future of work within Zanaco is all-inclusive?
Okay, so firstly, I do love solitaire, so no Janice. Disclaimer.
I
I don't think it's any account of how old you might actually be, again, without saying how old you are, but I love solitaire. I think it's one of those things that I actually still play when I have the moment.
It's very good for the mind.
It is.
It's on
actually.
your phone now, so I have it on my phone.
Right?
Yeah.
So, Rose, I think one of the critical things that I believe would drive productivity or in any organization is to what extent is innovation embraced? Because the pace at which times are changing is incredible, right? I go back to COVID because nobody planned for COVID, but we had to adapt because it was that critical. But that also taught us that we can pivot and we have the ability to be agile. Pre-COVID, I doubted very much that many institutions immediately adopted flexi working as an example, or potentially how else can we do things. But in the eye of a crisis, I guess, was the opportunity to understand how else we can pivot. Now, for Zanaco, one of the biggest things that we advocate for and push for, and is part of our valued behaviors, is innovation. There is such a huge innovation culture within the bank, including how can we make things faster and better. Listening to Janice, I'm amazed by the strides that ACCA is making, and it's fantastic. And I'm actually glad that this is the change that we're beginning to see even in Zambia to start with, right? And I think many of us are in the process of adapting or adopting new cultures, new changes. But the fact that we do have these areas in place to act on. So back to innovation, like I mentioned, as Zanaco, one of the things we do for productivity is how can we make things better? How can we make things faster? How can we make your work faster, more enjoyable, more easy to deliver? But how can we focus on the customers still? As a bank, leadership has taken such a keen interest and a huge drive in driving innovation. Just recently, we were running our internal innovation challenge. I'm not sure if you saw that, but in that challenge, it was not paid consultants. It was actually staff coming together to say, let's form a group, cross-functional teams in some cases, which is fantastic, right? How can we solve for this to make our experience better when we interact with customers, but also most importantly for the customer, how does this make it better for them? So therein is faster, better, more innovation from within the team. And we had amazing ideas. And 3 teams, as I speak right now, are working on their prototypes that then go into our mainstream customer proposition as well. So innovation remains embedded quite deeply. How quickly can we innovate? How quickly can we adapt? And how agile are we to pivot to our customers' needs and also to our organizational needs as well? So that's a huge part for Zanaco. And I think innovation is certainly the way to go. Yeah.
And on that fast note, we would love to carry on and on because as you can hear from these 2 brilliant minds from ACCA and Zanaco, my guests today, Janice Matwi, who is the Africa Regional Lead for Employer Relationships and Country Manager for ACCA, was joined by Kyembe Kyalusanza, Head of Communications at Zanaco. We've been talking culture immersion in the future of work. And the key words that stand out is understanding diversity and inclusion, understanding the different tiers of your teams and employees. And who better would we have had? But you heard it on Zanaco Unplugged. This is Rose CBC, and we look forward to another thrilling, thought-provoking conversation only on Zanaco Unplugged. Until the next time.